A weapon so fast it gives billion-dollar warships just seconds to survive, and it just got tested. China's new hypersonic YJ-21 carrier killer missile just changed naval warfare, and the U.S. Navy isn't taking it lightly. At dawn in the Pacific, steel cities drift across the horizon, each one carrying 5,000 souls and a nation's pride. For nearly 8 decades, the U.S. aircraft carrier has been more than a ship. It has been a moving empire. From the burning skies of the Pacific War to the silent waters of the Persian Gulf, these floating fortresses projected unmatched reach. Their decks launched not just jets, but the very idea of American power. Every crisis, every flashpoint seemed to begin with the same image: a carrier's silhouette on the horizon, with their strike wings, radar domes, and guided escorts. Carriers shaped a world order built on deterrence through presence, but power breeds exposure. As the oceans filled with satellites, sensors, and precision missiles, even the largest targets could no longer hide behind distance. The myth of the invulnerable carrier began to fracture. Today, hypersonic flight has turned that fracture into a fault line. A new age of warfare is emerging, one measured not in miles but in milliseconds. And as China unveils a missile that can penetrate defenses faster than sound itself, that age has arrived. Beijing's fear was never imaginary across the first island chain, from Okinawa to the Philippines. American carriers have loomed like sentinels since the 1950s. To China's military thinkers, these weren't just ships, they were floating instruments of containment. If conflict erupted over Taiwan, the US, the Navy could appear within days. Their air wings could control the skies, sever supply lines, and tilt the balance before the first soldier moved. So Beijing built a strategy not to win a naval duel, but to make sure one never happens. It's called a 2/AD, anti-access/area denial. Its logic is brutally simple: make the sea too dangerous for American intervention, cover every approach with missiles, drones, and radar nets so dense that a carrier strike group becomes a liability, not a threat. Each missile silo along China's coast became a silent declaration: you come closer, you won't leave. This wasn't aggression, it was geometry. A wall drawn in range circles, expanding outward across the South China Sea. And at the center of that wall stands the newest weapon, the YJ-21. A missile built not for warning, but for warning's end. It appeared first as a shadow, a grainy video from a Chinese destroyer, a missile rising vertically, then vanishing into the clouds. The YJ-21, or Eagle Strike 21, was no ordinary weapon. It marked the moment China entered the hypersonic age at sea. Unveiled quietly at the 2021 Zhuhai Air Show and confirmed during the PLA Navy's 2022 anniversary, the YJ-21 announced a new era of deterrence. 8 to 9 meters long, it can launch from Type 055 Renhai-class destroyers, massive warships designed to carry the future of Chinese firepower. Another version, the KD-21, is built for air release from heavy bombers, extending its reach even farther across the Pacific. The missile's reported speed, Mach 6 to Mach 10, turns distance into illusion. At those velocities, the YJ-21 can cover 1,500 kilometers in under 10 minutes, leaving enemy ships little more than seconds to react. It climbs high into the atmosphere, then descends in violent maneuvers, twisting, dipping, veering, paths too erratic for conventional tracking systems. No naval defense can reliably intercept an object moving that fast, that low, and that unpredictably. For admirals who once believed carriers were untouchable, the YJ-21 feels like a mirror held to vulnerability. It doesn't just threaten a ship, it threatens the entire logic of naval dominance itself. To understand its danger, compare it with what came before. For decades, anti-ship cruise missiles, America's Harpoon, France's Exocet, India's BrahMos, skimmed the sea at subsonic or supersonic speeds. They could be tracked, jammed, or shot down. Their attack pattern was predictable: low approach, steady radar lock, final impact. Hypersonics rewrote that script. Instead of flying through the air, they skip across the edge of space, gliding faster than any interceptor can pivot. The YJ-21 launches vertically, riding a booster into the stratosphere. Once free, it glides on a shifting trajectory, receiving mid-course updates from satellites, drones, and coastal radar networks that track every U.S. vessel in the region. Then comes the final act, a near-vertical dive at terminal velocity. By the time radar operators detect it, the window for defense is already gone. The Aegis Combat System and SM-6 interceptors, the pride of the U.S. The Navy is built for ballistic arcs and predictable speeds, not for a weapon that bends physics itself. In simulations, even a near miss could cripple a carrier's deck, radar, or command center. That's why experts call it a carrier killer. It's not just fast, it's intelligent, part of a network that sees, tracks, and strikes before the target even knows it's being hunted. Every weapon tells a story, and the YJ-21s began in 1995, when China found itself humiliated. During the Taiwan Strait crisis, the U.S. sent 2 aircraft carriers into the region, a gesture of dominance that Beijing could not answer. It became the defining trauma of China's modern military thinking. What emerged from that memory was a doctrine and a missile. The DF-21D, revealed years later, was the world's first true anti-ship ballistic missile, dubbed the original carrier killer. It could strike a moving ship hundreds of kilometers away. Descending from the upper atmosphere at Mach 10 later came the DF-26, nicknamed the Guam Killer, with a reach of over 3,000 kilometers, capable of targeting U.S. bases deep in the Pacific. But both systems were land-based, fixed to silos and launch vehicles. Their strength was deterrence, their weakness, immobility. China needed a way to bring that power to sea, flexible, unpredictable, mobile. That's where the YJ-21 completes the evolution. It fuses the speed of a ballistic missile with the precision and agility of a cruise system, and it sails with the fleet mounted aboard Type 055 destroyers. These missiles transform those ships into floating arsenals, each capable of forcing carriers to retreat beyond the first island chain. For the first time in history, China's Navy holds the kind of reach once reserved for the U.S. Navy. The ability to strike from anywhere, at any time, with little warning. It marks a shift from coastal defense to true blue water dominance. The YJ-21 isn't just a weapon, it's a message. It tells the world that China's military ambitions no longer end at its shores. They begin there. In August 2020, 2 streaks of light crossed the Chinese sky. One from the deserts of Qinghai province, another from the coast of Zhejiang. They were DF-21D and DF-26 missiles, launched within minutes of each other, arcing toward the South China Sea. Satellite images confirm both splashed down within a pre-designated maritime zone. The timing was no accident. Just days earlier, 2 U.S. carrier strike groups, the USS Nimitz and USS Ronald Reagan, had conducted joint exercises in the same waters. Beijing's test was the answer. A demonstration, not of range, but of resolve. High above the Pacific, the U.S. Air Force's RC-135S Cobra Ball aircraft watched every second, tracking telemetry and trajectory. To Washington, it was a test. To Beijing, it was a warning. Stay out of our sea. The launch crystallized China's stance on the South China Sea disputes, not through negotiation, but through physics. Each missile was a signal that control of the region might no longer depend on who sails the most ships, but who can hit first. In Washington, confidence remains the first line of defense, the U.S. The Navy insists its Aegis system, SM-6 interceptors, and layered radar networks can counter emerging threats. But behind closed doors, research labs are accelerating programs once deemed theoretical: laser defense, electronic jamming, and hypersonic interceptors to meet speed with speed. Yet history offers perspective. Carriers have been declared obsolete before, after the advent of submarines, after the age of nuclear weapons, after every new missile that promised their end. Each time they adapted, but adaptation now carries a higher cost. A 2023 CSIS wargame projected a U.S.-China conflict over Taiwan. The United States won, but lost 2 carriers and hundreds of aircraft. Victory, it concluded, would no longer look like triumph. Allies are taking note. Taiwan is expanding its stock of long-range anti-ship missiles and coastal radars. Australia, through AUKUS, is investing in nuclear submarines and hypersonic defense technology. Across the Indo-Pacific, navies are redesigning doctrines for a world where reaction time is measured in seconds. The message is clear. The age of slow-moving power projection is over. The future belongs to whoever can see and strike first. The YJ-21's roar didn't echo in isolation. It joined a growing symphony of speed reshaping global power. Before China's breakthrough, it was Russia that first lit the hypersonic fuse. In 2019, Moscow unveiled the 3M-22 Zircon, a scramjet-powered missile capable of Mach 8 sea-skimming strikes. Alongside it, the Ka-47 M2 Kinjal, an air-launched missile derived from the Iskander system, thundered across Ukraine's skies, the first hypersonic weapon ever used in combat. The United States, once the undisputed architect of cutting-edge aerospace innovation, suddenly found itself reacting instead of leading. Its flagship project, the AGM-183 AAR-RW, Air-Launched Rapid Response Weapon, once hailed as a breakthrough in hypersonic warfare, suffered a series of humiliating test failures. Despite billions invested, the missile never met performance expectations and was formally canceled in 2023. Other projects like the HAWC, Hypersonic Air-Breathing Weapon Concept, and the LRHW, Long-Range Hypersonic Weapon, remain in development, but they are years away from operational readiness. The superpower that once defined speed now struggles to catch up with it. Meanwhile, the rest of the world is accelerating. India's BrahMos 2, a joint venture with Russia, promises Mach 7 speeds and unprecedented precision. France, Japan, and Australia are quietly developing their own prototypes, refusing to be left behind in the race for dominance. Each nation now understands the same unspoken truth. Mastery of hypersonic flight is no longer about prestige. It's about deterrence itself. The country that controls it will define the tempo of modern warfare, dictating how fast wars begin, how swiftly they end, and who dares to start them at all. The YJ-21's appearance didn't just alarm Washington, it accelerated the global clock. For decades, nuclear arms defined peace through mutual destruction. Now hypersonic weapons blur that logic. They are fast enough to strike without warning, yet precise enough to seem usable. In this new competition, deterrence and aggression overlap. Every test, every launch, feels like a rehearsal for a war no one can win. The Cold War's balance of terror has returned. Only this time, it travels at 10 times the speed of sound. Inside Pentagon war rooms, the question is no longer hypothetical. Can a ship worth $13 billion survive against a weapon that crosses oceans in minutes? Some strategists argue for adaptation, not extinction. They envision a distributed maritime force, where power is spread across smaller, stealthier ships, unmanned vessels, and drone swarms. Instead of one floating fortress, the Navy becomes a fluid constellation of sensors and shooters. Others see futility. The economic logic is ruthless. For the price of a single supercarrier, an adversary can build hundreds of hypersonic missiles. Quantity becomes quality. In a world of Mach 10 weapons, even a perfect defense may not matter. Yet carriers remain more than machines. They are symbols. Each one represents deterrence, diplomacy, and national will. But symbols invite challenges. If even one were sunk, the psychological shock could rival Pearl Harbor, collapsing decades of strategic doctrine in a single hour. That fear alone shapes diplomacy. China doesn't need to fire the YJ-21 to project influence. It only needs the world to remember that every missile on a Type 055 becomes a silent negotiator, enforcing red lines without speaking. This is the paradox of hypersonics. They deter through terror, promise peace through panic. The future of carriers will depend not on armor or range, but on how nations redefine what it means to be safe at sea. The YJ-21's greatest impact isn't measured in explosions, but in hesitation. It's a weapon that reshapes the battlefield long before the first missile is fired. U.S. admirals now draw invisible circles on digital maps, the dreaded YJ-21 zones. Within these perimeters, every carrier becomes vulnerable. every maneuver a gamble. Crossing that line could mean annihilation. Staying beyond it means surrendering control of vital sea lanes. It forces even the most advanced fleets to respect unseen boundaries, turning open oceans into carefully measured minefields of fear and caution, where one wrong move could redefine naval warfare. In war games and real-world simulations, the YJ-21 doesn't even need to launch to change the outcome. Its presence alone dictates tactics, forcing every commander to adapt, second-guess, and hesitate. Strategic planners no longer ask if it will strike, but when and how far its reach truly extends. That uncertainty becomes its most potent weapon, an invisible force distorting decisions, delaying responses, and breeding psychological fatigue. In that way, the YJ-21 embodies modern deterrence. Power expressed through doubt. It projects dominance without firing a shot, proving that in the new age of warfare, perception is the deadliest payload. For China, the YJ-21 is more than a deterrent. It is proof of arrival that its military can now rival any power on Earth. It has redefined fear at sea, transforming strategy itself into a battlefield. The YJ-21 may never strike a carrier, yet its shadow now hangs over every ocean strategy meeting. It redefines fear at sea, speed as power, uncertainty as deterrence. The age of hypersonic dominance has begun, and every navy is racing to survive it.